Welcome back to the Game Collection. I'm SuperDerek, and it's been some time since I explored an indie RPG. So how about we take a look at an 8-bit style game with a focus on what really matters, the number of puns they can stuff into a single sentence. I am SuperDerek, and this is Pillars of Dust.
Pillars of Dust is an RPG by Retreaux Games and published by Something Classic. This game was developed by an incredibly small team. It was officially released on Steam in March of 2020. The game is overall a bite-sized experience, clocking in under 20 hours, and is perfect as a palate cleanser if you're coming off of a series of more serious titles. The game follows two protagonists, Gregg, a poor blacksmith who grew up in a slum, and Carlton, a prince of a kingdom. After finishing each chapter, you choose which protagonist to play through as next, but by the end of the game you will need to play all the chapters for each protagonist. Each story starts off simply enough. An old man sets our protagonists off into the world to discover their destiny and the truth about their histories. The overarching plot of the game isn't really going to be what draws most players into the game though. Instead, the writing of the game is what kept me coming back for more. Jokes, gags, slapstick, dad jokes, and puns were the name of the game. Well, Pillars of Dust was actually the name of the game, but suffice to say that if you're a glutton for punishment, well, welcome to the Punderdome. It's one of those games where you'll just be playing along and then moments later it'll dawn on you that strange interaction, funny name, or encounter exists solely for the sake of a pun, gag, or other punchline. And it's fantastic. For instance, throughout the game you'll find hidden throughout the land spooky cheese. What makes it spooky? Not sure, but you do eventually find Rick, a collector of fine cheeses who rewards you for locating them. So you'll soon find yourself hunting for cheeses to provide to Mr. Rick Cotta, who promptly disappears afterwards. If you think too hard about it, this cheese McGuffin is full of holes, really driving home how cheesy this whole joke has become for Rick Cotta. Surprisingly enough, this is definitely a thinking man's game, full of rich lore and deep political subtext that you'll definitely want to pay close attention to, or otherwise the whole latter half of the game will just go completely over your head and you'll be completely lost. Nah, that's not true. This is one of those sit back and zone out and laugh at some dumb jokes for a few hours kind of game, which is actually just a lot of fun. It's super low stakes, giving that perfect palate cleanser appeal. This is one of those turn your brain off and have fun kinds of games, and for the most part, that extends to the combat too. Pillars of Dust combat plays out like a Dragon Quest title with an ATB meter. Most of the time, combat is pretty easy. Your MP and HP restore after every fight automatically, so feel free to go all out every single time. But sometimes, boss fights will actually give you a run for your money. Luckily, failure allows you to simply retry the fight, so unexpected deaths aren't too punishing for the most part. Your protagonist, plus one other character that you hire from the guild, can perform basic attacks, cast magic, use items, and defend. Defending restores a percentage of your maximum magic points as well, making defending a strategically viable choice for long drawn-out fights. However, there is also another balance in place that increases the risk of using a turn defending. There's a countdown timer tied to the ATB clock that drastically increases enemy strength as the phase increases, and there are several phases that enemies can descend into, ultimately becoming extremely strong, especially boss fights. This means that while you can go all out with your magic, be careful of running out of MP, because defending to restore MP has you conceding advantages to your enemy. This mechanic seldom comes into play outside of boss fights though. It would be really nice to see this mechanic get some more use in the future. It should also be noted that even though the game is an 8-bit style RPG, the game features enemies on the dungeon and overworld maps, so encounters are not random. Furthermore, the player moves faster on the world map than enemies do, meaning you can easily avoid combat if you want to, but be sure not to wind up underleveled. Another unique mechanic that Retreaux introduced into Pillars of Dust is chapter goals. At the beginning of each chapter, you will be shown how many secrets there are to find in an area, how many stat boosting orbs there are to be found throughout the chapter, and how many nuggets the in-game currency you should try to acquire. Successfully hitting these targets grants more stat boosts at the end of the chapter. This is a really satisfying mechanic that further drove my, drive to explore the game and find those secrets. Visually, Pillars of Dust is exactly what you see before you and nothing more. The game has that NES-style aesthetic that would fit in right next to Dragon Warrior. I know that's not exactly for everybody, but it's nice to see an indie RPG exploring other art styles besides the standard 16-bit style we've been seeing a lot in recent years. Even though the 8-bit style isn't my favorite, it's definitely something I can enjoy, if only for a dozen hours or so. Musically, this game rocks. Especially some tracks from the end of the game really get the blood pumping.
Pillars of Dust is a good game with low stakes and is all around a pretty great time. It's a great way to unwind after a hard day of work without having the whole fate of the world resting on your shoulders. But above all else, this game cracks me up. And that's why it's got a spot in the Game Collection.
The Game Collection is a viewer-supported show. If you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing. For live streams of my playthroughs, follow me on Twitch. And thank you for watching.